Celeste's fork froze halfway to her mouth. She heard it, clear as breaking glass. Her mother-in-law Vivian's voice, low and sharp, leaning toward the waiter at Le Jardin Bleu. She's not really family. The words sliced through the soft violin music and polite laughter around their anniversary dinner table. Celeste's husband, Matthias, sat across from her, oblivious, cutting into his steak. Their two children, 8-year-old Amélie and 6-year-old Remy, colored on the white tablecloth with crayons the waiter had brought. Vivian's eyes never left Celeste as she straightened her silk scarf and smiled that cold, practiced smile. The waiter nodded, glanced at Celeste, then walked away. Celeste's throat tightened. She'd been part of this family for 9 years, married to Matthias for 8, loved his children like her own heartbeat. But to Vivian, she would always be the black woman who didn't belong. The restaurant felt smaller suddenly. Celeste looked down at her plate, the roasted chicken suddenly tasteless. Her hands trembled. She wanted to stand up, to confront Vivian right there, to ask why after all these years, after all the Sunday dinners and holiday gatherings and quiet sacrifices, she was still an outsider. But she didn't. She never did. Because Matthias would tell her she was overreacting, because Vivian would deny it with that victim's face she wore so well. Because causing a scene would only prove to everyone at this table that she was exactly what Vivian thought she was. Not refined enough, not French enough, not white enough to be family. So Celeste swallowed the hurt like she always did, smiled at Remy when he showed her his drawing of a castle, and pretended the knife in her chest wasn't there. What Vivian didn't know was that Celeste had been saving. For 2 years, she'd been putting money aside from her salon work, tucking it into an account Matthias knew nothing about. Not because she planned to leave, but because she'd learned long ago that a woman with no money of her own was a woman with no voice. Her grandmother had taught her that back in Georgia before Celeste moved to Paris at 19, chasing love and a dream that tasted like freedom. That dream delivered Matthias, a kind man with gentle hands and a mother who saw Celeste as a stain on the family portrait. Vivian had made it clear from day one. The comments about Celeste's natural hair, the questions about where she was really from, the way Vivian's friends looked at her like she was help, not family. Celeste's phone buzzed in her purse. She pulled it out under the table. A text from her lawyer, Inez. Documents ready. Call when you can. Celeste's heart pounded. She'd reached out to Inez 3 months ago, not for divorce, but for something else. Something Vivian would never see coming. Because while Vivian had spent years whispering poison and pulling strings to keep Celeste small, Celeste had been building something bigger. The salon she managed, she was about to buy it. The inheritance Vivian had been counting on from her late husband's estate, Celeste had discovered something about that too, something that would change everything. But tonight, she would smile. She would play the role, and tomorrow, she would show Vivian exactly what not really family could do. Matthias reached across the table and squeezed Celeste's hand. You okay, mon amour? He asked, his brown eyes soft with concern. She nodded, squeezing back, her smile practiced and perfect. Amélie giggled as Remy knocked over his juice cup and the waiter rushed over with napkins, avoiding Celeste's eyes. Vivian sipped her wine, her gaze sharp as she watched Celeste, waiting for her to break, to cry, to finally give her a reason to tell Matthias that this woman didn't belong. But Celeste didn't break. Not anymore. She'd spent too many nights crying into her pillow, too many holidays swallowing disrespect, too many years being treated like a guest in her own family. Those days were done. And when the storm came, Vivian would be the one left standing in the rain. Celeste met Matthias on a rainy Tuesday in October, 10 years ago. She was 22, new to Paris, working at a coffee shop near the Sorbonne, her French rough but improving. He walked in soaked, laughing at himself, his brown hair dripping onto his wool coat. He ordered a café crème and asked her name in English when he heard my accent. I said Celeste, and he repeated it slowly like tasting honey. They talked for an hour while she wiped down tables and he pretended to read a book he never turned the page on. He was studying architecture. I was studying him. The way his smile reached his eyes, the way he didn't stare at me like I was exotic fruit on display. When he asked for my number, I gave it, even though my grandmother's voice in my head warned me about men who smiled too easy. Our first date was at a small bistro in the Marais. He talked about his family, how his father had died when he was 16, how his mother Vivian had raised him alone, working long hours as a secretary, sacrificing everything so he could go to university. I heard the love in his voice, the reverence, and I thought it was beautiful. I told him about Georgia, about my grandmother who raised me after my mother disappeared into addiction, about coming to Paris with nothing but a suitcase and a dream to become someone new. Matthias listened like my words were scripture. When he kissed me goodnight on the Pont des Arts, I felt the world shift. I thought I'd found my person, my place, my future. I didn't know yet that Vivian was watching from the shadows, already planning how to break us apart. Vivienne met Celeste 3 weeks later. Matthias brought her to Sunday dinner at the family apartment in the 16th arrondissement, a place that smelled like old money and lavender. Vivienne opened the door, her face a mask of politeness stretched too thin. She looked Celeste up and down, her eyes pausing on Celeste's braids, her dark skin, her thrift store dress. "So you're the American," Vivienne said in French, not bothering with English, even though Matthias had told her Celeste was still learning. Celeste smiled and replied in her broken French, trying so hard to be liked, to be accepted. Vivienne nodded, said nothing, and turned away. The dinner was silent torture. Every question Vivienne asked felt like a trap. Where was Celeste's family? What did her father do? Did she plan to stay in France legally? Matthias tried to steer the conversation, but Vivienne ignored him, her eyes fixed on Celeste like she was a problem to solve. After dinner, while Matthias washed dishes, Vivienne cornered Celeste in the hallway. Her voice was soft, almost kind, but her words were venom. "My son deserves someone who understands our culture, our language, our way of life. You seem like a lovely girl, but this won't work. You'll see." Celeste's heart cracked, but she lifted her chin and said in careful French, "I love him, and I'm not going anywhere." Vivienne smiled, the kind of smile that promised war, and walked away. That night, Celeste cried in Matthias's arms and told him what his mother said. He held her, promised it would get better, swore his mother just needed time. Celeste wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe love was enough. But deep down, she knew Vivienne would never accept her, and the battle had just begun. Over the next 2 years, Celeste tried everything. She learned French until she spoke it fluently. She cooked Vivienne's favorite meals, remembered her birthday, complimented her taste, attended every family event with a smile that hurt her face. Nothing worked. Vivienne's cruelty was subtle, refined, impossible to prove. She'd introduced Celeste to friends as Matthias's girlfriend, even after they were engaged. She'd forget to invite Celeste to family gatherings, then act shocked when Celeste showed up. She'd make comments about Celeste's hair, her clothes, her accent, always with a laugh, always with plausible deniability. And Matthias, sweet, oblivious Matthias, would tell Celeste she was being too sensitive, that her mother didn't mean it that way, that she just needed more time. Celeste swallowed it all, the disrespect, the exclusion, the quiet humiliation, because she loved Matthias, because she believed marriage would change things, because she didn't yet understand that some people don't want you to belong. They want you gone. The wedding was supposed to be Celeste's day. She wore a dress she'd saved for months to buy, ivory silk that hugged her curves, her natural hair styled in an elegant updo with small white flowers woven through. Matthias cried when he saw her walk down the aisle of the small church in Montmartre. His friends cheered. Her grandmother, who flew in from Georgia, dabbed her eyes with a tissue. But Vivienne sat in the front row, stone-faced, wearing black like she was mourning. She didn't smile during the vows. She didn't clap during the kiss. And when the photographer asked for family photos, Vivienne stood as far from Celeste as possible, her body angled away, her expression cold. Later at the reception, Vivienne gave a speech that never mentioned Celeste's name, only talked about how proud she was of my Matthias and how she hoped he'd always remember his roots. Celeste danced with Matthias under string lights in the garden, trying to ignore the ache in her chest. Her grandmother pulled her aside during a slow song, her weathered hands gripping Celeste's arms. "Baby girl, that woman will never love you. You need to decide if you can live with that." Celeste's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. She'd already decided. She loved Matthias. She would make it work. Her grandmother shook her head. Worry creased in her face, but said nothing more. The rest of the night blurred together. Champagne, laughter, friends congratulating them, Vivienne disappearing early without saying goodbye. When Matthias carried Celeste over the threshold of their new apartment that night, she felt hope again. They were married now, a unit. Vivienne couldn't change that. But hope, Celeste would learn, was a fragile thing. The first year of marriage was hard. Matthias worked long hours at an architecture firm, leaving Celeste alone in their small apartment while she built her career as a hairstylist. She started working at a salon in the 10th arrondissement, mostly serving African and Caribbean clients who appreciated her skill with natural hair. The work was good, the clients kind, but the money was tight. Matthias's salary barely covered rent, and Celeste's income went towards groceries and bills. Vivienne knew this. She'd offer to help Matthias with money, but only if he came to her apartment alone. She'd cook him dinner, do his laundry, and treat him like a child, and send him home with leftovers that never included enough for Celeste. When Celeste confronted Matthias about it, he'd sigh and say, "She's just trying to help. Why do you always make it about you?" Celeste stopped arguing. She learned that in this family, her feelings didn't matter. Only Vivienne's did. When Celeste got pregnant with Amélie, she thought things might change. Vivienne loved children. Surely a grandchild would soften her, would make her see Celeste as family finally. But when Celeste called to share the news, Vivienne's response was flat. "I hope the baby looks like Matthias." That was all she said. No congratulations, no excitement, just the wish that her grandchild wouldn't look like Celeste. The words haunted Celeste through her entire pregnancy, through the morning sickness and sleepless nights, and fear that maybe Vivienne was right. Maybe she didn't belong. Maybe she'd made a terrible mistake marrying into this family. But when Amélie was born, with her father's brown eyes and her mother's deep skin, and a smile that lit up the room, Celeste fell in love all over again. Not with Matthias this time, with her daughter. And she swore she'd protect her. Vivienne visited the hospital once. She held Amélie for exactly 3 minutes, her face unreadable, then handed her back to Celeste. "She's beautiful," Vivienne said. But the words were empty, rehearsed. She left without asking how Celeste was healing, without offering to help, without any warmth at all. Matthias made excuses, said his mother was just overwhelmed, just needed time to adjust. Celeste didn't argue. She was too tired, too sore, too heartbroken to fight anymore. That night, alone in her hospital room, while Matthias went home to sleep, Celeste held Amélie close and whispered promises. "I won't let her hurt you. I won't let anyone make you feel small. You are enough. You are loved. You are mine." And in that moment, something shifted in Celeste. She stopped trying to win Vivienne's approval. She stopped caring if she was accepted. All that mattered now was protecting her child, and if that meant war, then war it would be. When Raimi was born 2 years later, Celeste hoped Vivienne would finally warm up. 2 grandchildren, a growing family. Surely that would be enough. But Vivienne's coldness only deepened. She'd visit on weekends, bringing gifts for the children, but only toys that reflected Matthias's heritage. French books, European dolls, nothing that acknowledged Celeste's culture, nothing that celebrated who Amélie and Raimi were. When Celeste bought African storybooks for the kids, Vivienne would frown and ask why they needed those. When Celeste styled Amélie's hair in beautiful braids, Vivienne would suggest maybe it was time to straighten it, make it more manageable. Matthias, as always, saw nothing wrong. He'd tell Celeste she was overreacting, that her mother just had her own way of doing things. But Celeste saw the truth. Vivienne wanted to erase her from her own children. The worst moment came when Amélie was 5. They were at Vivienne's apartment for Sunday lunch, a tradition Celeste had learned to endure rather than enjoy. Amélie was playing with her dolls on the floor when Vivienne's friend Marguerite arrived. Marguerite cooed over the children, then asked Vivienne, "Are these your grandchildren?" Vivienne hesitated, her eyes flicking to Celeste, then back to Marguerite. "This is Matthias's son, Raimi." She ruffled his hair. Then she paused, looked at Amélie, and added quietly, "And this is Amélie." No mention of being her granddaughter, just a name. Marguerite smiled, oblivious, but Celeste's chest burned. She stood up, her voice calm but firm. "Amélie is your granddaughter, Vivienne. Say it." The room went silent. Matthias looked panicked. Vivienne's face hardened, but she forced a smile and said, "Of course she is." "I misspoke." But Celeste knew it wasn't a mistake. It was a message, and that message was clear. These children were only family because of Matthias. Celeste stopped going to Vivienne's apartment after that. She told Matthias to take the kids on his own if he wanted, but she wouldn't subject herself to that humiliation anymore. Matthias was angry at first, accusing her of being dramatic, of keeping the kids from their grandmother. But Celeste stood firm. "Your mother doesn't see me as family. I won't force my children to watch her treat me like dirt." Matthias had no response to that. He knew it was true. He'd always known. He just didn't want to deal with it. So a new routine started. Matthias would take Amélie and Raimi to see Vivienne every other Sunday, and Celeste would stay home, enjoying the quiet but hating the loneliness. She'd clean the apartment, catch up on work, and wonder how her life had become this: separate, divided, halfway in, halfway out of a family that didn't want her. But Celeste wasn't idle during those lonely Sundays. She worked. She saved. She built. The salon where she worked, Maison Éclat, was struggling. The owner, an older woman named Simone, wanted to retire but had no one to sell to. Celeste approached her with a proposal. She'd buy the salon, but she needed time to save for a down payment. Simone, who'd always respected Celeste's work ethic, agreed. They drew up a plan. Celeste would manage the salon, increase revenues, and when she had enough saved, the business would be hers. It became Celeste's lifeline, her purpose beyond being Matthias's wife and Vivienne's target. Every client she served, every euro she saved, was a step towards independence, towards power, toward a future where she wouldn't need Vivienne's approval or Matthias's defense. She would stand on her own. Matthias didn't know about the salon deal. Celeste told herself it was because she wanted to surprise him, but deep down, she knew the truth. She didn't trust him to support her. He'd proven time and again that when it came to choosing between her and his mother, he'd choose Vivienne. He'd make excuses, downplay Celeste's pain, protect his mother's feelings over his wife's dignity. So Celeste kept her plans secret. She opened a separate bank account, funneled her salon earnings into it, and worked extra hours styling hair for weddings and events. Vivienne probably thought Celeste was just a hairstylist, small and simple, no threat at all. But Celeste was building an empire, one braid, one client, one saved euro at a time. And when the moment was right, when Vivienne least expected it, Celeste would show her exactly who she was dealing with. Not a victim, a fighter. It started with a phone call. 3 months before the anniversary dinner, Celeste answered the apartment phone while folding laundry. A man's voice, formal and French, asked for Matthias. "He's not home," Celeste said. "Can I take a message?" The man hesitated, then said, "This is regarding his father's estate. We need to discuss the property in Provence. There's been some confusion about the beneficiaries." Celeste's hand stilled on a towel. Property in Provence? Matthias had never mentioned property. The man gave her a number, asked Matthias to call back, and hung up. Celeste stood there, heart pounding, a strange feeling crawling up her spine. She'd been married to Matthias for 8 years. Why didn't she know about this property? And why was there confusion about beneficiaries? When Matthias came home, Celeste asked him about it. He looked surprised, then uncomfortable. "It's nothing, just an old family property my father owned. It's complicated." Celeste pressed. "What do you mean complicated?" Matthias sighed, running a hand through his hair. "When my father died, he left the property to me and my mother jointly, but we've never done anything with it. It just sits there." Celeste frowned. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Matthias shrugged. "Never seemed important. My mother handles all that stuff." And there it was again. My mother, the center of every decision, every secret, every part of Matthias's life that Celeste wasn't allowed to touch. She let it go that night, but the question gnawed at her. Why would a lawyer call about beneficiaries if everything was straightforward? Something didn't add up. Celeste did what she always did when she needed answers. She researched. She found the lawyer's number, called, and introduced herself as Matthias's wife. The lawyer, Monsieur Rachet, was professional but careful with his words. He explained that Matthias's father, Claude Benoit, had indeed left property in Provence, a vineyard worth substantial money. But there was an issue. Vivienne had been listed as the primary beneficiary in Claude's will, with Matthias as secondary. However, recent tax documents showed Vivienne had been collecting rental income from the vineyard for years, without ever informing Matthias or distributing his share. Monsieur Rocher had reached out because the tax office flagged inconsistencies. Simply put, Vivienne had been stealing from her own son, and she'd hidden it for over 15 years. Celeste's hands shook as she hung up the phone. She sat in the quiet apartment, the truth settling over her like cold water. Vivienne, the woman who played the martyr, who acted like she had sacrificed everything for Matthias, had been stealing from him, keeping money that was rightfully his, money that could have helped them buy a bigger apartment, could have eased their financial stress, could have changed their lives. And she'd done it all while making Matthias feel guilty for not giving her enough attention, enough gratitude, enough devotion. The betrayal was staggering. But what shocked Celeste more was the realization that if she told Matthias, he probably wouldn't believe her. Or worse, he'd make excuses for his mother. He always did. So Celeste made a decision. She'd handle this herself, quietly, carefully. And when the time was right, when Vivienne least expected it, Celeste would show her exactly who she was dealing with. Not a victim, a fighter. Celeste became a detective in her own life. She started paying attention to everything, every conversation, every document, every slip Vivienne made. She asked Matthias casual questions about his father's death, about family finances, about what his mother had told him over the years. She learned that Vivienne had always insisted the vineyard was worthless, that it barely covered its own taxes, that selling it would be more trouble than it was worth. But Monsieur Roche's research told a different story. The vineyard, Domaine Bonnois, was leased to a wine production company that paid 30,000 euros annually for 15 years. That was 450,000 euros Vivienne had pocketed while telling her son there was nothing to inherit. The numbers made Celeste sick, but they also made her focused. This wasn't just about money. This was about justice. Monsieur Roche obtained copies of the property tax records, the lease agreements, and bank statements showing deposits into Vivienne's personal account. Everything was legal on paper. Vivienne was the primary beneficiary after all. But morally, ethically, it was theft. Matthias had never been informed of the income. He'd never received a single euro. And Vivienne had spent it all on herself. Renovations to her apartment, luxury vacations, expensive clothes. Meanwhile, her son and his family struggled to pay rent. Celeste laid out all the documents on her kitchen table one night after the kids were asleep, staring at the evidence. She could confront Vivienne now, could blow everything up and force the truth into the open. But she waited, because confronting Vivienne wasn't enough. Celeste wanted her to understand what it felt like to be powerless, to be excluded, to be seen as nothing. She wanted revenge, yes, but she wanted it to be perfect. The second part of Celeste's plan involved the salon. Simone was ready to finalize the sale. Celeste had saved 40,000 euros, enough for the down payment and legal fees. The salon had potential, great location, loyal clients, room to grow, but it needed a rebrand, fresh energy, someone who understood the market Simone had been missing, young professional women, particularly women of color, who wanted a space that celebrated them. Celeste had a vision. She'd rename it, renovate it, turn it into the kind of place that felt like home. But she couldn't do it alone. She needed capital. And that's when she realized the vineyard money wasn't just about justice for Matthias. It could be justice for her, too. If she could force Vivienne to pay what she owed, Celeste could use it into the salon, into her future, into building something Vivienne could never touch or take away. Celeste met with Inez, a lawyer she'd found through a client, a sharp Algerian woman who specialized in family law and estate disputes. Inez reviewed the case and smiled. "You have everything you need. Vivienne can't fight this. The question is, what do you want?" Celeste thought about that question for a long time. What did she want? She wanted Matthias to see his mother for who she really was. She wanted Vivienne to apologize, to admit she'd been wrong, to beg for forgiveness. But she knew none of that would happen. Vivienne would deny, deflect, play the victim like she always did. So instead, Celeste wanted something simpler. Freedom. Freedom from needing Vivienne's approval. Freedom from financial dependence on Matthias. Freedom to build a life where she answered to no one but herself. And that meant taking what was owed and using it to build her empire. Inez drafted a letter. It was formal, legal, and devastating. It outlined the property income, the years of withheld funds, and the legal consequences if Vivienne didn't settle. It demanded that Vivienne pay Matthias his rightful share, 225,000 euros, within 30 days, or face a public lawsuit that would expose her actions to the entire family and community. Celeste held the letter in her hands, her heart racing. This was it. The moment she stopped being the victim and became the one holding the power. But she didn't send it yet. She wanted to wait for the perfect moment. The moment it would hurt the most. When Vivienne would finally understand that underestimating Celeste Bonnois had been the biggest mistake of her life. And that moment, Celeste decided would be the anniversary dinner. Right after Vivienne whispered to the waiter that Celeste wasn't really family. Right when Vivienne felt most comfortable, most in control, that's when Celeste would strike.
The anniversary dinner was supposed to be a celebration. 9 years married, two beautiful children, a life built together despite the odds. But as Celeste sat at that table in Le Jardin Bleu, listening to Vivian's whispered cruelty, she felt something inside her snap. Not break, snap. Like a bone that had been cracked too many times, finally giving way. She looked across the table at Matthias, laughing at something Vivian said. Oblivious as always, she looked at her children, innocent and perfect, coloring on the tablecloth. And she looked at Vivian, that smug smile on her face, the way she held her wine glass like a queen holding a scepter. And Celeste thought, no more. No more swallowing the pain, no more pretending it doesn't hurt, no more being small. Tonight, this ends. After dinner, Matthias suggested they go back to Vivienne's apartment for dessert. He said, "Mama made your favorite tarte tatin," to Celeste, as if that would make everything better. Celeste shook her head. "I'm tired. You take the kids, I'll meet you at home." Matthias frowned. "Are you okay?" Celeste forced a smile. "I'm fine, just need some air." Matthias kissed her forehead, loaded the sleepy children into the car, and drove off with Vivienne. Celeste stood on the sidewalk outside the restaurant, the Parisian night cool against her skin, and pulled out her phone. She called Inez. "Send the letter tonight." Inez paused, then said, "Are you sure?" Celeste looked up at the stars, barely visible through the city lights, and said, "I'm more sure of anything in my life." By midnight, the letter was couriered to Vivian's apartment. By morning, everything would change.
Celeste didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed next to Matthias, who snored softly, unbothered by the storm about to hit. She thought about all the years she'd spent trying to fit into this family, trying to be enough, trying to make Vivian love her. She thought about the first time Vivian made her feel small, that Sunday dinner 10 years ago, when she'd been so hopeful, so naive. She thought about every holiday, every birthday, every moment she'd bitten her tongue and swallowed her pride. And she thought about her grandmother's voice. "Baby girl, that woman will never love you. You need to decide if you can live with that." Celeste had decided. She couldn't. Not anymore. She tried love, tried patience, tried grace. Now it was time for truth. And truth, she'd learned, was the sharpest weapon of all. The call came at 7 in the morning. Matthias's phone rang, loud and jarring. He fumbled for it, still half asleep, and answered. "Maman?" His voice was groggy, confused. Then it shifted. "What? Slow down. What are you talking about?" Celeste lay still, her heart pounding, listening. She heard Vivian's voice through the phone, shrill and panicked. She heard Matthias say, "A letter? From who? What does it say?" And then silence. Long, heavy silence. Matthias sat up, his face pale in the morning light. He looked at Celeste, really looked at her, and she saw the question in his eyes before he asked it. "Did you know about this?" Celeste sat up slowly, meeting his gaze. "Know about what?" Matthias's hand shook as he held the phone. "My mother, there's a letter about my father's property, about money he couldn't finish the sentence." Celeste's voice was calm. "About money she stole from you." The room exploded. Matthias jumped out of bed, pacing, running his hair through his hair. "You knew? You knew and you didn't tell me?" Celeste stood, her voice steady. "I found out 3 months ago. I hired a lawyer. I tried to protect you." Matthias laughed, but it was bitter, angry. "Protect me? By going behind my back? By attacking my mother?" Celeste's calm cracked. "Attacking? She stole from you, Matthias, for 15 years. 450,000 euros. Money that was yours, that could have helped us, and she kept it all." Matthias shook his head. "There has to be an explanation. My mother wouldn't—" Celeste cut him off. "Your mother did. The documents are in the drawer. Bank statements, tax records, lease agreements,
all of it. I hired a lawyer to handle it quietly, to give her a chance to make it right without destroying the family. But tonight, at dinner, when she told that waiter I wasn't family, I decided she doesn't deserve quiet. She deserves truth. An hour later, they were at Vivian's apartment. Matthias had called ahead, his voice tight, demanding answers. When Vivian opened the door, her face was a mask of wounded innocence. Matthias, darling, this is all a misunderstanding. But Matthias pushed past her, Celeste following. The apartment was pristine as always. Expensive furniture and fresh flowers, everything paid for with stolen money. Matthias held up the letter Enes had sent. Is this true? Did you keep the vineyard money? Vivian's eyes darted to Celeste, hatred flashing across her face. This is her doing. She's trying to turn you against me. Matthias's voice rose. Answer the question, Mama. Vivian's shoulders sagged, and for the first time, Celeste saw fear in her eyes. It's complicated, she whispered, but complicated wasn't an answer. It was an admission. Matthias sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. Why? His voice broke. Why would you do this? Vivian sat beside him, reaching for his hand, but he pulled away. I did it for you, she said desperately. Your father left me nothing. The property was all I had. I used the money to survive, to keep this apartment, to make sure I could still be here for you. Celeste's voice cut through the room like a blade. You renovated your kitchen last year for 20,000 euros. You went to Italy for 3 weeks. You bought a new car. Don't lie and say you needed that money to survive. Vivian's face twisted with rage. You have no right to speak. This is family business. Celeste stepped closer. I am family. I've been family for 9 years, and you've spent every one of those years trying to erase me. Vivian stood, her voice shaking. You were never supposed to be part of this family. Matthias was meant to marry someone like us, someone who understood our culture, our values. But he brought you home, and I've had to watch you try to change him, try to make him forget who he is. The words hung in the air, raw and ugly. Matthias looked at his mother, really looked at her, and Celeste saw something shift in his face. Is that what you think? He asked, quietly. That Celeste changed me? Vivian nodded. She made you forget your roots. Matthias shook his head. No, she made me remember what matters. She gave me a family, real love, not control disguised as sacrifice. And you stole from me, from us, from my children. Vivian's face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. But Matthias didn't comfort her. He just stood there, the truth settling around him. Celeste handed Vivian a copy of the documents. You have 2 choices. Pay Matthias what you owe him, all of it, within 30 days, or we file a lawsuit, and everyone, your friends, your family, everyone will know what you did. Vivian's hands shook as she held the papers. I don't have that kind of money. Celeste's voice was ice. Then sell the apartment. Sell your car. Liquidate whatever you need to, because this ends now. Vivian looked at Matthias, pleading, You're going to let her do this? Destroy your own mother? Matthias's voice was hollow. You destroyed yourself, Mama. I just didn't want to see it. And with that, he walked out of the apartment, Celeste following. As the door closed behind them, Celeste heard Vivian sobbing. Part of her felt satisfaction, but a bigger part just felt tired. Tired of fighting, tired of hurting, tired of this family that had never wanted her. She reached for Matthias's hand, but he didn't take it, and she knew the hardest part was still to come. Matthias didn't speak on the drive home. He gripped the steering wheel, his jaw tight, his eyes red. When they got back to the apartment, he went straight to the bedroom and closed the door. Celeste stood in the living room, listening to the silence, feeling the weight of what had just happened. She'd won, in a way. She'd exposed Vivian, forced the truth into the light, but she'd also broken something in Matthias,
and she didn't know if it could be fixed. She checked on the kids. Amelie and Remy were still at a neighbor's house, safe and oblivious. Then she sat on the couch, pulled out her phone, and texted Inez. "It's done." Inez replied, "How do you feel?" Celeste stared at the question. How did she feel? Powerful, yes, but also alone, because the battle was won, but the war had left casualties, and one of them was her marriage. The next 2 weeks were brutal. Matthias barely spoke to Celeste. He went to work, came home, played with the kids, and slept on the couch. He wouldn't look at her, wouldn't touch her, wouldn't engage beyond the bare necessities of co-parenting. Celeste tried to talk to him, tried to explain that she'd done this for him, for their future. But Matthias wasn't ready to hear it. "You should have told me," he'd say, his voice flat. "You should have let me handle it." But Celeste knew the truth. If she told him, he would have done nothing. He would have confronted his mother, she would have cried and lied, and he would have believed her. Because that's what he always did. Vivian had spent Matthias's whole life conditioning him to protect her, to see her as fragile, to excuse her cruelty. Breaking that conditioning wasn't gentle. It was violent, and Matthias was grieving. Vivian tried everything to turn Matthias against Celeste. She called constantly, leaving tearful voicemails about how cruel Celeste was, how she was tearing the family apart, how Matthias needed to choose between his wife and his mother. She sent long texts, scripture quotes about forgiveness, photos of Matthias as a child, anything to manipulate his emotions. But something had broken in Matthias too. He didn't answer the calls. He didn't respond to the texts. He just existed. Celeste watched him unravel from a distance, wanting to comfort him but knowing he wouldn't let her. She'd saved him from his mother's theft, but in doing so, she'd also stolen his illusions. And illusions are, sometimes, all people had to hold on to. Without them, Matthias was lost, and she didn't know how to bring him back. But Celeste didn't stop moving. Forward. She finalized the salon purchase with Simone, signing the papers with shaking hands and a smile that felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Masonic cloth was hers. She owned something, finally, something Vivian couldn't touch, something Matthias hadn't given her. It was hers by right of work, sweat, sacrifice. She renamed it La Couronne Noire, the Black Crown, a name that felt like armor and declaration all at once. She renovated, painted the walls deep purple and gold, installed new styling stations, hired 2 more stylists. The salon became her sanctuary, the place where she felt powerful, seen, valued. Her clients celebrated with her, brought champagne, posted about it on social media. And slowly, Celeste started to feel like herself again. Not Matthias's wife, not Vivian's target, just Celeste, whole and enough. Matthias noticed the change. One evening, he came home from work and found Celeste laughing on the phone with a client, her natural joy bubbling up in a way she hadn't heard in months. When she hung up, he asked quietly, "You bought the salon?" Celeste nodded. "2 weeks ago. I used my savings." Matthias's face was unreadable. "Why didn't you tell me?" Celeste set her phone down, meeting his eyes. "Because I needed to do this on my own. I needed something that was mine, that I built, that no one could take away." Matthias looked down at his hands. "Is that what you think? That I'd take it away?" Celeste's voice was gentle but firm. "I think for 9 years I've been trying to fit into your life, into your family, and it's never been enough. I needed to stop waiting for permission to exist." Matthias was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded, and for the first time in weeks, he looked at her like he was seeing her again. That night, after the kids were asleep, Matthias and Celeste sat at the kitchen table with tea and the documents from Monsieur Rocher. They went through everything together, the property details, the stolen money, the years of lies.
Matthias's hands shook as he read. Celeste reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I was trying to protect you, but I see now that wasn't my choice to make. Matthias looked up, tears in his eyes. I feel like my whole life has been a lie. Everything I thought I knew about my mother, about my family. It's all fake. Celeste squeezed his hand. Not everything. Your love for your kids is real. Your work is real. We're real. Matthias held her gaze. Are we? Because I don't know if I can forgive you for keeping this from me. And I don't know if I can forgive my mother for what she did. And I don't know how to live in between.
Matthias went to see Vivian alone. He told Celeste he needed to do this himself, to face his mother without mediators or lawyers. Celeste agreed, though fear twisted in her gut. She knew Vivian was a master manipulator, knew she'd try every trick to win Matthias back. But this was his choice to make, his wound to heal or let fester. All Celeste could do was wait. She picked up the kids from school, made dinner, helped with homework, and watched the door. When Matthias finally came home 3 hours later, his face was puffy, his eyes red. He looked older somehow, like he'd aged years in a single afternoon. He sat down at the table and Celeste handed him a glass of water. What happened? She asked gently. Matthias stared at the glass. She admitted it, all of it. She said she kept the money because she felt like my father owed her after everything she sacrificed. She said she was going to tell me eventually, but then I married you, and she couldn't stand the idea of you benefiting from it. His voice cracked. She said she'd rather lose me than see you win. Celeste's heart broke for him. I'm sorry, she whispered. Matthias shook his head. Don't be. You didn't do this. She did. I've spent my whole life making excuses for her, telling myself she was just protective, just scared of losing me. But the truth is, she's selfish. She's always been selfish. And I didn't want to see it because seeing it meant losing the fantasy of having a loving mother. He looked up at Celeste, his eyes raw. I don't know how to let that go. Celeste moved closer, kneeling beside his chair. You don't have to let it go all at once. You're allowed to grieve. You're allowed to be angry. You're allowed to love her and hate what she did at the same time. Matthias's tears fell freely now. I told her I needed space, that I couldn't see her until she made this right. And she told me if I chose you over her, she'd never forgive me. Celeste's breath caught. This was the ultimatum she'd feared, the moment where Matthias would have to choose. She braced herself for rejection, for him to say he couldn't lose his mother, that their marriage was over. But instead, Matthias took her hands in his and said, I choose you. I choose our family. I should have done it years ago. And in that moment, something healed between them. Not everything, but enough. Over the next month, Matthias and Celeste rebuilt their relationship piece by piece. They went to couples therapy, something Celeste had suggested years ago, but Matthias had always resisted. The therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Laurent, helped them navigate the trauma, the betrayal, the years of unspoken resentment. Matthias admitted he'd enabled his mother's cruelty by refusing to see it, by asking Celeste to endure instead of demanding his mother change. Celeste admitted she'd built walls around herself, stopped trusting Matthias to protect her, stopped believing their marriage could survive. They both cried. They both apologized. And slowly, tentatively, they started to rebuild trust again. It wasn't easy. Some days were harder than others, but they were trying. And that, Dr. Laurent said, was what mattered most. Vivian, meanwhile, was forced to sell her apartment. The property was worth enough to pay Matthias's share and leave her with a modest amount for a smaller place. She moved to a studio in a less expensive neighborhood, her life downsized, her pride shattered. She tried to contact Matthias several times, sending letters that alternated between apologies and blame. But Matthias didn't respond. He wasn't ready. And maybe, Celeste thought, he never would be. Some relationships couldn't be saved. Some betrayals ran too deep. Vivian had made her choices, now she had to live with the consequences. And for the first time in 9 years, Celeste didn't feel guilty about that. Vivian's pain wasn't her responsibility.
her own healing was, and she was finally putting herself first. La Couronne Noire opened on a sunny Saturday in May. Celeste had poured everything into making it perfect. The purple and gold decor, the shelves stocked with natural hair products, the music playing Afrobeat and R&B, the smell of shea butter and coconut oil welcoming clients like a hug. She'd invited everyone, her clients, her friends, her neighbor who'd watch the kids during the hard weeks. She'd even invited Matthias's colleagues, wanting them to see this part of her life, this piece of herself she'd built alone. Matthias stood beside her as they cut the ribbon, his hand on her back, his pride visible. Amélie and Remy ran around the salon, laughing, touching everything. And Celeste felt something she hadn't felt in years, joy, pure, uncomplicated joy. The salon was packed all day. Women filled every chair, getting braids, twists, silk presses, color treatments. Celeste moved through the space, greeting clients, checking in with her stylists, feeling the energy of something alive and thriving. Her phone buzzed with congratulatory texts, one from her grandmother in Georgia, "I'm so proud of you, baby girl." One from Inez, "You did it, you're free." And even one from Simone, the former owner, "This place was always meant to be yours." Celeste read each message, her heart full, her eyes damp. She'd fought so hard for this moment, had endured so much to get here. And now, standing in her own business, surrounded by her community, she realized it was worth it. Every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt, it was worth it. At the end of the day, after the last client left and the stylists went home, Celeste stood alone in the salon. She looked around at the space she'd created, the mirrors reflecting gold light, the stations neat and ready for Monday, the sign in the window that read La Couronne Noire in elegant script. She thought about the woman she'd been 10 years ago, stepping off a plane in Paris with nothing but hope and naivete. She thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, swallowing hurt at Sunday dinners, accepting crumbs of respect from a family that didn't value her. And she thought about the woman she was now, a business owner, a fighter, someone who'd taken back her power. She smiled, locked the door, and walked into the Parisian evening feeling lighter than she had in years. The war wasn't completely over, but this battle, this one, she'd won. Matthias surprised her that night with a small celebration at home. He'd cooked dinner, badly, but with effort, and bought flowers, daisies because he remembered they were her favorite. The kids had made cards with crayon drawings of crowns and hearts. They ate together at the kitchen table, laughing at Matthias's burnt chicken, telling stories, being a family. After the kids went to bed, Matthias pulled Celeste onto the couch and held her close. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for not seeing you, for not standing up for you, for letting my mother hurt you for so long." Celeste rested her head on his chest. "I forgive you," she said, and she meant it. Not because the hurt was gone, but because holding on to it would only poison what they were trying to rebuild. Forgiveness, she'd learned, wasn't about forgetting. It was about choosing to move forward anyway. That night, lying in bed with Matthias asleep beside her, Celeste thought about Viviane. She wondered if the older woman was lying awake too, if she regretted her choices, if she understood what she'd lost. Part of Celeste hoped she did. Part of her hoped Viviane felt even a fraction of the pain she'd inflicted over the years. But mostly, Celeste just felt nothing. Viviane had become irrelevant, a ghost from a past Celeste was leaving behind. There was no anger left, no desire for revenge, no need for closure. Viviane had destroyed herself through her own bitterness and greed, and Celeste had survived, had thrived, had built something beautiful in spite of it all. That was victory enough. She closed her eyes, exhaustion pulling her under, and for the first time in 9 years, she slept peacefully. No nightmares, no anxiety, just rest. 3 months after the grand opening, Viviane appeared at La Couronne Noire.
Celeste was finishing a client's braids when the door chimed, and she looked up to see her mother-in-law standing awkwardly in the entrance. Vivienne looked smaller somehow, her expensive clothes replaced with simple, worn pieces, her hair gray at the roots, her face lined with exhaustion. The salon went quiet. Everyone knew who Vivienne was. Celeste's team had heard the stories. One of the stylists, Isada, moved protectively towards Celeste, but Celeste held up a hand. It's okay. She finished securing the braid, smiled at her client, and walked over to Vivienne. What do you want? Her voice was calm, neutral, giving nothing away. Vivienne's hands twisted together. I came to apologize, to really apologize, not just say words. Celeste crossed her arms. Okay, I'm listening. Vivienne took a shaky breath. I was wrong. About everything. About you, about keeping the money, about the way I treated you for all these years. I told myself I was protecting Matthias, protecting our family legacy. But the truth is, I was jealous. Jealous that he loved you more than he loved me. Jealous that you gave him something I never could. A real partnership, a real family. I was scared of losing him, so I tried to push you out. And instead, I lost everything. I lost my son. I lost my dignity. I lost myself. Tears streamed down her face. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed you to know that I see now what I did, and I'm sorry. Celeste stood there, processing. Part of her wanted to reject the apology, to tell Vivienne it was too little, too late. But another part, the part that had grown through all this pain, recognized genuine remorse when she saw it. Vivienne wasn't playing a game this time. She was broken, humbled, finally facing the consequences of her actions. Celeste gestured to a chair in the waiting area. Sit. Vivienne sat, and Celeste sat across from her. The salon buzzed quietly around them, stylists and clients pretending not to listen, but absolutely listening. Celeste zoomed forward. I appreciate your apology. I do. But an apology doesn't erase 9 years of pain. It doesn't give me back the holidays I spent crying, the nights I questioned my worth, the moments I had to explain to my children why their grandmother treated me like I didn't exist. Vivienne nodded, fresh tears falling. I know. I can't undo any of it, but I want to try to make it right, however I can. Celeste considered this. Matthias needs space. He's not ready to see you. Maybe he never will be. That's his choice, not mine. Vivienne's face crumpled, but she nodded. I understand. Celeste continued. But if you're serious about making amends, then start by respecting his boundaries. Don't call, don't show up. Let him come to you if and when he's ready. Vivienne whispered, what if he never is? Celeste's voice was gentle but firm. Then you accept that. Because love isn't about control. It's about letting people be free, even if that freedom means they walk away from you. The words hung between them, heavy with truth. Vivienne stared at her hands. You're a better person than I am. Celeste shook her head. I'm just a person who learned the hard way that holding on to bitterness only hurts yourself. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for me. Because I refuse to let your actions define the rest of my life. Vivienne stood slowly, wiping her eyes. Thank you for listening. And congratulations on the salon. It's beautiful, just like you. The compliment was so unexpected, so sincere, that Celeste felt her own eyes sting. She nodded, unable to speak. Vivienne turned to leave, then paused at the door. For what it's worth, Matthias was right. You were always family. I was just too blind and too proud to see it. and then she was gone, the door chiming softly behind her. Celeste sat there for a moment, processing what had just happened. Isata came over, put a hand on her shoulder. "You okay, boss?" Celeste smiled, the weight on her chest a little lighter. "Yeah, I think I am." That evening, Celeste told Matthias about Vivian's visit. He listened quietly, his face unreadable. When she finished, he asked, "Do you believe her?" Celeste thought carefully. "I think she means it. I think she's finally hit rock bottom and is trying to climb out. But believing her and trusting her are two different things. I can believe she's sorry without giving her access to hurt me again." Matthias nodded slowly. "I'm not ready to see her." Celeste took his hand. "I know, and that's okay. You get to decide what's right for you. No pressure, no timeline." Matthias squeezed her hand. "Do you think I'm being cruel, cutting her off like this?" Celeste shook her head. "I think you're protecting yourself. And after everything, you deserve that protection." Matthias pulled her close, resting his chin on her head. "I don't know if I'll ever be ready to forgive her." Celeste held him tight. "Then don't. Forgiveness isn't mandatory. Your peace is." Over the following weeks, Celeste found herself thinking about Vivian more than she expected, not with anger or resentment, but with something closer to pity. She thought about how Vivian's need to control cost her everything she actually wanted, how her fear of losing Matthias created the exact loss she feared, how her inability to accept Celeste left her isolated and alone. It was a cautionary tale, really, a reminder that love built on conditions and control wasn't love at all. It was imprisonment. And eventually, everyone involved broke free or broke down. Vivian had broken down, and now she had to rebuild from nothing. Celeste didn't wish her harm, but she didn't wish her back into our lives either. Some bridges, once burned, were meant to stay ash. Amelie started asking questions. She was 9 now, old enough to notice that they hadn't seen Grandma Vivian in months, old enough to sense the tension even when her parents tried to hide it. One night at dinner, she asked, "Why don't we visit Grandma anymore?" Matthias and Celeste exchanged glances. They'd known this conversation was coming, had prepared for it, but it still felt impossible. How do you explain betrayal to a child? How do you balance honesty with protecting innocence? Celeste took a breath. "Grandma made some choices that hurt our family. Your papa and I are taking time to heal from that, but it doesn't mean Grandma doesn't love you." Amelie frowned. "Did she hurt you, Mama?" Celeste's throat tightened. "Yes, sweetie, she did." Amelie's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, Mama." Celeste pulled her daughter into her arms. "It's not your fault, baby. None of this is your fault." Remy, only 6, looked confused. "Is Grandma bad?" Matthias spoke gently. "No, buddy. Grandma isn't bad. She just made mistakes. Sometimes grown-ups hurt each other even when they don't mean to." But Amelie was sharper than that. "Did she mean to hurt Mama?" The question hung in the air. Matthias looked at Celeste, his eyes asking permission. She nodded slightly. He turned back to Amelie. "Yes, I think she did. And that's why we're not seeing her right now. Because when someone hurts people we love on purpose, we have to protect our family." Amelie processed this, then hugged Celeste tighter. "I love you, Mama. You're my real family." Celeste's tears fell silently into her daughter's hair. That night, after tucking the kids in, Celeste and Matthias sat on the couch in the quiet apartment. "She understood more than I thought she would," Matthias said. Celeste nodded. "Kids are resilient, but we need to watch her, make sure she doesn't internalize this, doesn't think she has to choose sides." Matthias agreed. "Maybe we should take them to see someone, a child therapist." Celeste thought that was a good idea.
They found a therapist who specialized in family transitions, and over the next few months, Amélie and Remy worked through their feelings about their grandmother, about change, about what family meant. The therapist assured Celeste and Matthias that the kids were handling it well, that giving them space to ask questions and express emotions was exactly right. And slowly, the tension lifted. The kids laughed more, played more, seemed lighter.
One Saturday, Amélie asked if she could visit Grandma Vivienne. Matthias tensed, but Celeste put a hand on his knee. "Why do you want to see her, sweetie?" Amélie shrugged. "I miss her a little. And I want to tell her that she was mean to you, and that wasn't okay." Celeste's heart swelled with pride and pain. "That's very brave, but you don't have to do that if you don't want to." Amélie's chin lifted. "I want to, because you're my mama, and nobody should be mean to you." Celeste looked at Matthias, who nodded slowly. "Okay, if that's what you want, we can arrange it. But Mama or I will be with you the whole time." Amélie agreed. The visit was scheduled for the following week. Celeste was terrified, but she also trusted her daughter. Amélie was strong, stronger than Celeste had been at her age. And maybe, just maybe, this little girl could say what Celeste had never been able to. The visit happened at a neutral location, a park near Vivienne's new apartment. Celeste, Matthias, and the kids arrived first. Vivienne came a few minutes later, walking slowly, her face a mix of hope and fear. Amélie ran up to her, and Vivienne knelt down, tears already falling. "Amélie, my darling girl, I've missed you so much." Amélie hugged her, but then pulled back, her face serious. "Grandma, I love you, but I need to tell you something." Vivienne nodded, her hands shaking. Amélie took a breath. "You were mean to my mama for a really long time, and that hurt her, and it hurt Papa, and it hurt me and Remy because we saw her sad." Vivienne's face crumbled. "I know, sweetheart. I know." Amélie continued, her voice steady. "Mama says people make mistakes, but she also says we have to say sorry and mean it and then do better. Can you do better, Grandma?" Vivienne looked at Celeste, who stood a few feet away, Remy holding her hand, Matthias beside her. Vivienne's voice was thick with tears. "I'm trying, Amélie. I'm trying every day." Amélie nodded. "Good, because I want you to be part of our family, but only if you're nice to Mama, because she's the best mama in the world, and she deserves to be treated good." Out of the mouths of babes, Celeste's tears fell freely now, pride and love overwhelming her. Vivienne reached for Amélie's hands. "You're absolutely right. Your mama is wonderful, and I'm sorry I didn't see that sooner." Amélie smiled, satisfied. "Okay, can we go to the swings now?" And just like that, the heaviness lifted. The kids ran to the playground, and the adults sat on a bench, watching them, the air between them still fragile, but a little less broken. 6 months after that park visit, Matthias received a call from Monsieur Rouche. There was another issue with his father's estate. Claude Benoit had not only left the vineyard, but also a life insurance policy Vivienne had never disclosed. The payout had been significant, 200,000 euros, deposited into Vivienne's account the year after Claude died. Another betrayal, another lie. Matthias sat in stunned silence as Rouche explained the details, his world cracking open again just when he'd started to rebuild. He called Celeste at the salon, his voice shaking. "There's more.
She took life insurance money too. Celeste closed her eyes, exhaustion flooding through her. What do you want to do? Matthias was quiet for a long moment. Then, I want to confront her. For real this time. I want her to look me in the eye and tell me why. The confrontation happened at Vivien's small studio apartment. Matthias, Celeste, and Monsieur Rouge sat across from Vivien in her cramped living room. Vivien looked tired, older, defeated before the conversation even started. Matthias laid out the documents. Life insurance, Mamam. 200,000 euros. When were you planning to tell me? Vivien didn't deny it. She just sat there, staring at her hands. I was scared. Scared that if you had money, you wouldn't need me anymore. Scared that you'd leave me alone. Your father left me alone, and I couldn't handle losing you too. Matthias's voice broke. So you stole from me. For 16 years, you lied to me, took what was mine, and told yourself it was okay because you were scared. Vivien sobbed. I know it was wrong. I know it was unforgivable. I didn't know how to stop. Celeste spoke for the first time. You didn't stop because you didn't want to. You chose yourself over your son every single time. Vivien looked at her. And for once, there was no defensiveness, no excuses. You're right. I did. And I destroyed everything that mattered because of it. Monsieur Rouge cleared his throat. Madame Benoit, you have 30 days to repay the life insurance funds, or we will pursue legal action for fraud and theft. Vivien nodded numbly. I'll have to sell everything, but I'll do it. Matthias stood abruptly. I don't want your apologies anymore, Mamam. I don't want your tears or your explanations. I just want what's mine. What my father left for me. What you had no right to take. And with that, he walked out. Celeste followed, leaving Vivien alone with her choices and consequences. In the car, Matthias broke down. Celeste held him as he cried, his body shaking with grief and rage and exhaustion. I thought the worst was over. I thought we dealt with it and moved on, but it just keeps coming. Celeste stroked his hair. I know it's too much, but this is the last of it. Roche checked everything. There's nothing else. After this, it's done. We get the money, we invest it in our future, and we close this chapter for good. Matthias looked at her, his eyes red and swollen. How are you so strong? How do you keep going after everything? Celeste smiled sadly. Because I have to. Because I have you, and I have our babies, and I have my salon. And those things are worth fighting for. Your mother tried to break me for 9 years. She failed. I'm still here. And so are you.
That night, lying in bed, Matthias asked Celeste something he'd never asked before. Do you ever regret marrying me, marrying into this mess? Celeste turned to face him, cupping his cheek. Never. Not once. I regret the pain. I regret the wasted years trying to win your mother's approval. But I don't regret you. I don't regret our children. I don't regret the life we built in spite of everything. You are the best decision I ever made. Your mother is her own person, separate from you. Her choices aren't your choices. Her failures aren't your failures." Matthias kissed her, soft and grateful. "I love you. I don't say it enough, but I do. You saved me. In every way a person can be saved." Celeste kissed him back. "We saved each other." And for the first time in months, they made love. Not desperate or angry, but gentle, tender, a reconnection of souls that had been battered but not broken. A year later, everything had changed. Vivienne had sold her apartment, her car, and most of her possessions. She'd repaid Matthias the life insurance money plus interest. She'd moved into a small assisted living community on the outskirts of Paris, her health declining, her spirit diminished. Matthias visited her once a month, brief visits with the children, but kept firm boundaries. No more manipulation, no more excuses. Just stilted conversations and awkward silences, the wreckage of a relationship that could never be fully repaired. Celeste didn't go. She'd forgiven Vivienne in her heart, released the anger and pain, but she didn't need to be in her presence. Some forgiveness happened from a distance, and that was okay. With the money from the vineyard and life insurance, over 600,000 euros total, Matthias and Celeste transformed their lives. They bought a beautiful apartment in the 11th arrondissement with high ceilings and big windows, space for the kids to grow, a home office for Matthias. Celeste opened a second location of La Couronne Noire in the 18th, near where she'd first arrived in Paris all those years ago, bringing her vision of beauty and empowerment to a new neighborhood. Matthias left his old firm and started his own architecture practice, focusing on sustainable design. They invested in their children's education, in travel, and experiences. They built a life not defined by trauma, but by triumph. Not by what they'd survived, but by what they'd created. And it was beautiful. Amélie, now 10, was thriving. She was confident, bright, protective of her mother in a way that made Celeste's heart ache with pride. She'd started a student council at school focused on diversity and inclusion, inspired by watching her mother fight for her place in a world that didn't always welcome her. Remy, 8, was gentler, creative, always drawing pictures of castles and dragons and families holding hands. When asked to draw his family for a school project, he drew 4 figures: Mama, Papa, Amélie, and himself, standing in front of a big purple building with the crown on top. Her teacher called it the most joyful family portrait I've ever seen. Celeste framed it, hung it in the salon, looked at it whenever she needed a reminder of why she'd fought so hard. For them. Always for them. One Sunday morning, the family sat together at breakfast in their sun-filled kitchen. Matthias made pancakes while Celeste braided Amélie's hair. Remy colored at the table, tongue sticking out in concentration. The radio played Afrobeat music, and Amélie danced in her chair. It was ordinary, perfect, whole. Celeste looked around at her family, at the life she'd built despite everything, and felt profound gratitude. She thought about the woman she'd been 10 years ago, stepping off that plane with nothing but hope. She thought about the woman she'd been 2 years ago, sitting at that anniversary dinner, swallowing hurt, while her mother-in-law whispered poison. And she thought about the woman she was now, a business owner, a mother, a wife, a fighter who'd reclaimed her power and her joy. The journey had been brutal, but she'd survived. More than survived. She'd thrived. Later that day, Celeste received an unexpected message. A video call request from her grandmother in Georgia. She answered, and her grandmother's weathered face filled the screen, eyes bright with tears. "Baby girl, I heard about your second salon, about everything you've built. I'm so proud I could burst." Celeste's own tears fell. "Thank you, Grandma. I wish you were here to see it." Her grandmother smiled. "I see it every day. I see it in your face. You got your light back. That's all I ever wanted for you."
They talked for an hour about life and love and everything in between. When they hung up, Celeste felt her grandmother's words settle into her bones. She had her light back. Vivienne had tried to extinguish it for 9 years, but Celeste had kept a spark alive, protected it, fed it, until it became a flame that nothing could put out. That evening, after the kids were asleep and Matthias was reading on the couch, Celeste stood at their balcony window looking out at Paris. The city lights twinkled like stars, and somewhere out there, in a small assisted living community, Vivienne was living with the consequences of her choices. Celeste didn't feel anger anymore. She didn't feel satisfaction or vindication. She just felt free. Free from the need to be accepted by people who didn't value her. Free from the weight of carrying someone else's hatred. Free to be herself, fully and unapologetically. She thought about Vivienne's whisper that night at the restaurant. She's not really family. And Celeste smiled, because the truth was finally clear. She'd never needed Vivienne to call her family. She'd built her own family, one rooted in love, respect, and choice. A family that saw her, celebrated her, protected her. A family that was real in every way that mattered.
Matthias came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. Celeste leaned back into him. "I'm thinking about how far we've come, how we almost didn't make it, but we did." Matthias kissed her temple. "We did, and I'm grateful every day that you didn't give up on us." Celeste turned in his arms, looking up at him. "I didn't give up on us. I just stopped giving up on myself. And that made all the difference." They stood there in the quiet evening, holding each other. Two people who'd been broken and rebuilt. Scarred, but stronger. Below them, Paris hummed with life. And inside their home, inside Celeste's heart, there was finally peace. The kind of peace that comes not from the absence of struggle, but from the presence of hard-won joy. The kind of peace that says, "I survived, I fought, I won, and I am enough. I've always been enough, and no one, not Vivienne, not anyone, could ever take that truth away again."